Good morning, ATS. Come on, guys, let's get some energy back in the room. I'm Zuzanna from MIQ, and I am so very, very excited to be here. I mean, it is not every day you get Jeff and Andrew as your warm-up act. Thank you for that exchange wire. Right, so for those of you not yet familiar with MIQ, we are not your average programmatic partner. Our approach is truly unique. We are agnostic, we operate across the breadth of the ecosystem in media and data, and we bring unique technology, in a minute we'll tell you more about that, our smart AI and absolutely award-winning data sciences, all to bear to power our traders in delivering outstanding service and performance for our agency and brands. And we will never compromise on quality. Now, I've just nailed that intro speech, but I am only in my second week, and that's why I've invited the formidable John Goulding to join me on stage. John is the brains behind our TV intelligence platform, and I'm going to be drawing on his extensive expertise of the CTV space to bring to life how we unleash that for you. John, would you like to introduce yourself to our lovely audience?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm John, Chief Strategy Officer at MIQ, and yeah, my day-to-day is building the product, the tech behind MIQ. So I don't know how this has happened, but we've let a geek onto the stage, and today I've got loads of data, like loads of charts.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you into a little secret about John. He went and got a haircut, especially for this occasion, hence why he's looking so dapper.
Thanks.
Anyway, John, enough about you. Let's land some CTV nuggets for this lovely audience. So I want to start first with looking at what are some of the blockers holding back investment into the space. You heard some of that from Andrew, and we're going to talk about three things. And number one on my list is scale. There is a perception that outside of broadcasters, it is actually quite a fragmented ecosystem, and even though streaming services have brought their advertising opportunities online, those audiences aren't quite yet there to be meaningful. So how are we going to solve for more scaled inventory in this space?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's the consumer that's going to solve for this, right? So if people watch more streaming and they can put up with ads, then we're going to get scale globally, but in the UK in particular. And so we're going to focus a lot today on the UK, and I thought I'd start with this chart, which for me sets out a bit of the landscape right now. And we've got two things here. We've got the percent of people's view time on TV and OTT compared with the percent of their ad spend, advertisers' ad spend on those two areas. And the first thing we can see, we already know. So the first thing is that OTT view time is going up, 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 up. That's awesome, great. But the thing that's a little bit concerning is that the forecasts would suggest, we're already seeing this trend, that the percent of ad spend is flatlining in OTT. So why is that? And then the second thing is, we always think about it as like money's moving from TV into OTT, but it's not a zero-sum game. So ad spend is declining in TV, but it's not going into OTT. It's going somewhere else, right? And if I was a betting person, that's probably right now, it's social, it's performance channels like search.
Wow, that's interesting to hear. But what I actually want to know from this slide is more viewership actually going to give me more advertising scale?
Yeah, okay, so that's the second thing, right, which is now we need ads on that view time. I just feel very, very bullish, again, globally, but specifically in the UK, that ad time is now going to follow all of that view time. Lots of tailwinds behind this, right? So if we look at the major streaming apps right now, YouTube, Netflix, Prime, they've all got ads tiers in them, varying levels of adoption in that, but very high adoption on YouTube and Prime in particular, 73 minutes per day of viewing just on those three. So there's lots of ads entering premium streaming, but also consumers are viewing more of their OTT on the big screen. So there's lots of stats from Google on this, but we see in our data, 57% of the YouTube ads we're buying on the TV. It's CTV inventory. So there's lots more TV kind of coming because people are migrating to that screen. And then lastly, there was this stat in Roku's recent report. They saw a 75% increase in viewing on their Roku channel. And what's really sat behind this is AI. So they're recommendation engines that are getting people to suggest more fast content and get people to keep on viewing and viewing are getting better and better. And so AI in the TV space is creating this huge tailwind of more view time as well.
Okay, so we have scale. Let's jump to number 2 on my list, which is pricing. Now, I can promise you there was a very sharp intake of breath across agency AV teams when our streaming friends first landed their price points. And given that the average CPM in CTV is, pushing up north of £30, it's not surprising that advertisers have a real scrutiny on that plan. You just mentioned AVOD and FAST. Can we anticipate that helping to give more price flexibility?
Yes. Yes, I think there's a couple of things are going to happen, right? So in general, ad supply in this space is going up. That is going to pull down CPMs. We're already seeing that happen. But then when we look at FAST in particular and AVOD, I think maybe in this market in particular, we're a bit dismissive of these right now. They have been a bit lower scale in the past, but AVOD and FAST is coming to this market, and we cannot ignore it. So, Tubi is a great example, probably the biggest app of its kind in the US, just launched in the UK in August. Overnight, they've got the biggest content library in the UK, and consumers are going to flock to that because it's free. And it's not just Tubi, right? We've got LG, Samsung. They're all predicting that the UK and Europe are going to be some of their biggest markets for FAST. So that's coming, and yeah, it's about 40% cheaper than premium streaming. So your SVOD, your BVOD. And it kind of bridges that gap on the pricing spectrum between more of your classic kind of video, your YouTube, and that premium streaming.
Okay, so we have scale, and with the right inventory diversification, we can get to competitive pricing. So coming to sort of the third blocker on my list, and that's really around complexity. If we cast our mind back, and we don't have to go back too far, TV was a really nice bucket of linear. And fast forward less than 10 years, you have this whole spectrum of inventory available to you. I've just spent the last 2 years on the buy side, and I can promise you that complexity is really challenging to navigate, especially when you're trying to understand the value of all of this different inventory. So how would we go about that, John?
Yeah, so take a step back. MIQ, what we live and breathe every day is programmatic, like most people in this room. So before we can think about what to buy and what the value of a given ad is, we've got to understand the kind of supply-demand landscape. So up here on the screen is some data from Barb. It was published by Thinkbox earlier this year. And I guess this tells a simple story on the surface. In dark red, some people watch lots of linear TV. They're actually the people who watch the most TV overall. And then other people in the pink and the blue, they much more favor OTT viewing, right? And what's interesting is if you download the raw data from this, and instead of indexing it all to 100%, you look at the absolute terms, which obviously we all do that. It looks like this, okay? And the story actually behind this data is that some people watch far, far more TV than other people, right? So if you look at the heaviest 20% of UK TV viewers, they're viewing more than 10 hours a day across all formats. And they consume in total 53% of all view time on the TV. It's absolute madness, right? But then at the other end of the spectrum, there's these 40% of people down here who watch almost no commercial linear. They're only watching about an hour and a bit of TV every single day. And interestingly, more than half of their viewing is YouTube, SVOD, and AVOD. So then, from a programmatic perspective, I'm salivating here. It's like, this is a very wildly diverse inventory landscape. The people down at that 40% end are really hard to reach. That's a scarce user. I'd be willing to pay more to find them. Whereas you could hit these people blindfolded because they're watching TV all day, every single day.
You love a chart, don't you, John?
I do love a chart.
When I'm looking at this, though, the question I have is, how do we actually translate this insight to be meaningful on my AV plan?
Yeah, okay, so at this point, I'm going to switch into a slightly different data set to set some context. This isn't information from when we run campaigns. What I'm going to show you is ACR data. That's tech that's embedded into smart TVs. It gives you real-time viewing behavior. We see about 200 billion TV signals in the UK. And then what we've done is we've used Barb to kind of extrapolate that out to the whole population. And as I'm going to start going through this, I've selected supermarkets as just the category to look at. And I'm going to start with Tesco, but we're going to look at a range. But now what we're sort of jumping into is that real viewership data from ACR. So the first thing to note is, as we kind of jump into the data, is that Tesco's ads, they've reached 13 million people in the last 30 days. If we break it into 5 groups by viewership, it's got exactly the same kind of trend. The top 20% have received 62% of Tesco's ads, a frequency of 46 per user. And then obviously there's this big long tail. The bottom 40% have only seen about 6% of ads, and that's at a frequency of about 2. It's a very, very uneven distribution, and it's simply because of the kind of underlying traits of some people watch more TV than others. Yeah, and I want to say this is not unique to Tesco. This is a problem that everyone has if you're spending a lot in TV. So Aldi, they're delivering 64% of their ads to the top 20% of viewers. Asda, they're delivering 57% at really, really high frequencies.
So beyond just the supermarket category, is this systemic across all of TV?
Yeah.
I guess when I look at this data, and I think back to that 40% of unreachable by TV audiences, there's actually quite a sweet spot for advertisers there, because there's a real opportunity to gain share of voice with those users that aren't exposed to TV. And through that, a brand can actually gain quite a nice competitive advantage. But how would we make that actionable?
Yeah, so I might be biased, but obviously we think programmatic is a big part of the answer here, and in particular, buying OTT. So at this point, we kind of switch and look at the OTT mix of this. But if you're not really intentional, actually, then you're still going to have a similar distribution curve, 54% of ads to the top 20, a little bit better down at the bottom end, right? But if you can drill into the data, you've got really powerful TV intelligence. You could start to say, well, what are the shows that these guys don't watch that the underexposed guys do watch? And we could heavy up on that content, for example. And in this example, the bottom 20%, they're actually watching loads of football content, Premier League, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we could just simply add in some more of that type of content and start to even out this frequency distribution. But obviously, with programmatic, we can go much, much beyond that. We can be super specific. We can target the households that are underexposed. We can exclude the ones that are oversaturated. You can do that at a postcode level, IP level, demo level, whatever you want to do.
John, you might not know this about me,
Okay.
but I love programmatic, which is, on reflection, probably quite a good thing, considering I've just joined MIQ. But I have been really proudly championing programmatic since its inception. And I think it would be a little bit remiss of us if we didn't touch on the fact that sometimes programmatic gets a bit of a bad rep, and probably we are quite a culprit in that. So if we think about this golden opportunity that you're painting for us of CTV being bought through programmatic, how do we ensure that we leapfrog like that Wild West era that we saw display and mobile go through?
Yeah, so look, I'll get onto the Wild West bit in a second, but first, I guess that in defense of programmatic, why programmatic? If you can use it well, you can solve this problem, right? You could take 20% of your budget out of that really overexposed group and put it down into the people who weren't getting enough ads. And when we look at the data on this, typically on a campaign, 90% of ads served to that lowest quintile is programmatic CTV. So it's solving a really important problem. But then if we talk about the Wild West, I just think, like, let's go back to some programmatic 101 and make sure that's all in place. But also, I think, we're older and wiser now as an industry. We should be able to start to anticipate problems rather than just simply react to them when an Analytics article comes out or an ANA report or whatever. So let's talk about that. So I think 101-wise, there's some clear reasons why programmatic can solve big, big problems in this space. Frequency capping, super basic, it's got to be in place. Dynamic pricing, you can see different users are worth vastly different amounts. That's super obvious. And then I think the things we should be getting into in a bit more depth are things like supply path optimization. So I think Andrew was starting to bring this up. There's loads of complexity bubbling up in CTV now. And I think we think, oh, well, SPO is not a CTV problem because I buy it all through a PMP and it's super direct. That's just not true, right? So even in the UK, which is more nascent, we're already seeing multiple paths to a given piece of supply. You could save a lot of money if you pick the right path, 50% plus. But then actually, like, where we're going to be in 2 to 3 years is the US. And there, you've got over 100 paths to a given piece of supply, 250% premium if you get it wrong. And it's for all of the reasons that Andrew was saying, these different carriage agreements, entrance of FAST and AVOD, publishers advancing their monetization strategies. It creates the spaghetti of SPO. You've got to get ahead of this, otherwise it'll be a mess. And the second thing I really think it's important to say is like your supply path begins with a DSP, right? So you've got to pick the right DSP to buy through to get the best results. And again, this is sort of bubbled up in the conversation this morning. I'm going to say it, like some DSPs have got cleaner pipes to certain supply than others. They prioritize auctions in different ways, blah, blah, blah. But as a result, depending on what you're buying, there can be up to a 40% price difference on a given piece of CTV by picking the right DSP or wrong DSP. So all sorts of stuff, but we've got to get ahead of these problems. We can see them in the US, they're coming to the UK.
So let me summarize what we've just been discussing then. I think we can confidently say that CTV is a great way to connect with those hard-to-reach light TV viewers. And as you showcased, viewership is on the up, and with the advent of streaming, advertising, and increasing growth in AVOD and FAST in the UK, we can really see the ad scale rising as well. You have very eloquently promoted programmatic as really the way to future-proof your CTV strategy. And if you get the right setup, then you should really be able to unlock its full potential. Is there anything else to add?
Yeah. I mean, there is one more thing, which is kind of, I think there's a different tech stack that we need in order to get this right. For all the reasons you've just said, the consumer's coming, the ads are there, but it's like we need an evolved CTV stack to really nail this. And so I think some of the things we've been through today, you don't just need one DSP. I think you need a DSP-agnostic approach to do this well. And then what you need layered on top of that is this household-level TV intelligence. You can't really buy correctly unless you've got that in place. So we've spent a lot of investment and time building that. I think from like a relevance perspective, we haven't really touched on this, but audience and context solutions are really important, especially in environments like YouTube, and some things that we might take for granted in web, like what app am I buying? You need to do a lot of additional data mapping and cleaning to report out on that correctly. But then when it comes to efficiency, if you don't want to get it really wrong, if you want to buy it at a good price, for me, independent SPO is so important. We've talked a lot about independent ad tech today, but I think if you take control of one thing, it's got to be your supply path. And so building the right technology to do that well is super, super important. And then for me, it's like this is very, very fragmented space. You're using loads of DSPs. How do you just get one campaign at the end of the day with one report? And you need some tech to sort of make all that really manageable.
Thanks, John. So I think all that's left for me to say is I really hope we've inspired you that programmatic is the key to unlocking the potential to CTV. And at MIQ, we are here to help you unleash that full opportunity at every step of the way. John, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening.